infinite capacity to problem solve has led us to develop the Shark Slider Nano, providing you with minimum form factor, flawless bi-directional 2-axis camera movement. Precision gesture control technology provides fast, accurate, reliable, and repeatable track movement, perfect for both interior and exterior location work. Minimum power consumption, exceptional runtime, and USB-C charging means you'll never miss a shot. Flexibility is key. Operate using either our IPS touchscreen or our standalone app. The Nano turns your smartphone into a powerful motion capture device packed with tons of features. The Shark Slider Nano. Dependable camera movement, whenever and wherever you need it.
Give me that microphone!
Hello everyone, welcome back to ProAV TV. I am joined once again by the lovely Mehdia from Canon. Hello Mehdia, how are we?
Good afternoon, Carl. We're very well, thank you. I hope you're well too.
I'm all right. It's this streaming setup, I mentioned this a little bit last time, but it's completely new to us and is a Blackmagic setup, which we'll show you in a minute. Actually, that's a large part of the stream, but involves cabling all the cables up and all that sort of stuff, whereas our system before was a much more expensive, probably overkill for something like this really, TriCaster setup, which was all done on networking and NDI, which meant I could just sort of plug it in and turn it on, and it was done. Whereas there's a little bit more involved in this streaming setup, which I'm not used to. So the starts of these live streams is a little bit more stressful behind the scenes than it ever used to be. But I think it's all working. If there is any problems, let us know in the chat as we go. But today we're going to be talking about multi-camera, which is why it was so important for us to get the streaming set up right. We're talking about Canon cameras, obviously, but focusing down on how they're used within multi-camera production. And multi-camera production covers a huge variety of work. You know, that's streaming setups in corporate environments like it is here. It's huge Glastonbury with 50 cameras on it. You know, they're all multi-camera productions, so it's hard to structure something like this for something like that because of the wide varieties, like talking about just video as a whole. So we'll base this on Q&A as we go. I think is the best way to do this, quite an informal chat. So if you guys have got anything you want us to talk about or any questions that you have for us, let us know. I can bring them up on screen. We can use that to dictate the way the conversation goes. But how much is multi-camera a part of, you know, what you guys think about over at Canon? How important is it to Canon, do you reckon?
It's probably one of the main selling points, I think. If you're looking at the Canon products, whether we're talking the video cameras, so that's the camcorders, the cinema cameras, PTZ, or even including mirrorless, all being basically different category, how well they work together as part of the Canon imaging system. And that's what we try and hopefully cover today, is the benefit of using Canon or Canon cameras in a multi-camera setup, and what it can save you in terms of, as I said, in terms of post. So if you're editing your footage later, how easy it is to set it up so that you reduce post time massively. And even in terms of the colors, I mean, everyone talks about the Canon color science, but as I said, the focus here is how well, as I said, the cameras work together and how easy it is to set them up so that the video will look the same from every single camera in that setup, be it a cinema camera, be it the XF605, for example, that we're using today, or PTZ, as well as the mirrorless cameras.
So last time we put a little question to people in the comment section as to what did they think we were using on each camera. I'm just going to go down and read some of the comments and replies that we got. I should have found these before we started the stream. I'm just looking for them now. So Bob guessed that he said it would seem a bit too obvious that the XF605 was doing the wide shot. So his educated guess is that the more expensive C500 was on Mehdia, which he found interesting. The cheaper XF605, cheaper with inverted commas, XF605 on me, and the C70 doing the wide shot was his guess.
Very interesting.
Which is actually entirely wrong. I can see why he went down that route. That would be a very logical way to set it up. It's actually entirely wrong. Shall we go through the cameras and so actually if you cut to the PTZ, Sergey, I can reveal the setup. So this is us over here, you know, Mehdia's cameras right the way over there. My camera's just out of shot this way, and the wide is just out of shot. The shot on me is the C70. Wide camera is actually a C500 Mark II with a fancy cinema prime on as well, which is massively overkill. Didn't really need to be that. And the camera on me is the XF605. Sorry, the camera on Mehdia is the XF605. Camera over on my side. So if we cut now between each of the shots, okay, you can see what each one looks like. So this is the C70 with a very nice RF lens on it as well. Actually, the shot, go back to the shot of me. So okay, that's the 50mm RF 1.2. So that is a lovely RF lens on there, and a very different optics to particularly the 605, which is of course a zoom lens on a fixed lens camera. This is the XF605. You can notice that there's a little bit less depth of field behind Mehdia there because of that. More because the lens really than the sensor, but the sensor is playing into
Yeah.
it massively. But obviously I think we're at f4 on that shot of you because of the focal length that we're at, whereas we're on f1.2 for me. We've tweaked this wide angle shot massively from last stream, more in terms of exposure and framing. It was raised up a little bit more with the actual light that's above us up there in shot. We've now lowered it down so that you can't see that quite as much. It's just a nice white wall, and we've put some foreground interest down there on a little coffee table, so you're not just looking at our legs underneath the desk. But that's the C500 Mark II on the wide, which, to be honest, isn't really doing the C500 Mark II justice.
No, I mean, it doesn't have to be a C500 there.
Yeah, on a wide shot like that, it could be any of these cameras and it would probably look exactly the same. And then if we carry on talking through the setup, obviously we've got those 3 cameras plus our 2 microphones, which are being XLR'd back over to the editing desk, which is Sergey, which is over here. There we go. Give us a wave, Sergey. So we've got a Mac running OBS, which is there, which is just adding a couple of the final streams and adding the pre-roll bits and bobs. We've got the 8M Mini Extreme ISO down there for inputs, so that's taking all the camera inputs, all the and there's actually a zoom recorder behind it, which is taking the audio inputs there. And we've got a multi-view over here, which is displaying the 8M interface, obviously. So a very, very simple setup, but actually very different to what we used to do. But this is probably a much more relevant setup for our customer base, I think, than what we used to use. This is probably how, with these sorts of cameras, most people are using them as in a multi-camera environment. So really, in terms of Canon technologies, in a setup like this, the only one that we're using, apart from the PTZ, which was swirling around to see all of that, which I'll talk through in a minute, the only thing we're really using is wide DR to match them all, right?
Yeah.
So should we talk a little bit about some of that color side of things to help that look good?
So on most of our cameras, cinema cameras, XF605 for example, they do have what we call custom picture, which is one of the sub-menus once you go into the menu. And within the presets, which is now kind of the first preset, is YDR. The benefit of YDR is it does give you the maximum dynamic range without you having to basically grade afterwards. Because we all know with C-Log 2, C-Log 3, yes, you can get 14 or 15 or 16 plus with the C-Log 2, but it does require grading, and we're talking from an hour to, it could be a number of hours depending on the footage. So YDR is an easier way of basically matching colors between different cameras, basically just by selecting it. It still uses BT709 color space and the neutral color matrix. So this is key. I mean, you pick up as I said, any of the cinema cameras we have here today, so the C70, the C500, even the R5C, they all have that option and the color matrix, even actually the R5. And going back to the EOS R, obviously with the EOS R, it had it under a different menu, but you did have the option to apply the neutral color matrix, and that will give you the best color match when using it with Canon. There are other options if you mix in non-Canon cameras within the setup, so you do have production cameras or video as well, so if you mix in non-Canon camcorders, for example, as well, older cinema cameras, because as we know, the sensors have improved massively, so the colors will look different. I mean, the easiest way to think of YDR is an improved version of the what everyone is familiar with, which is BT709 standard, because it does maintain or capture more details in the highlights, which is one thing that BT709 doesn't do well in tricky situations. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we use YDR now all the time for this channel. So pretty much everything that you see on this channel for the last like maybe 4 videos backwards is all shot on YDR. Before that, we were using C-Log and grading it, and then just sort of went, why are we doing this? It's wasting time, really, more than anything else. And so we moved to YDR, and I think hopefully kept it looking just as good as when we were using log, and it's certainly sped us up massively, so especially when we're using multiple cameras together.
Yeah.
And I think in a situation like this, I think it ends up looking pretty good. Let us know what you think in the chat as we go, what you think of the setup, and if you think the colours match and all the rest of it, let us know.
I mean, you can, even with YDR, you can go into it and tweak it if you want to.
Of course. Yep.
But even as standard, you shouldn't have to do much as I said, to easily match the look from the 605 with the C500 and C70.
Absolutely. And the smaller cameras as well.
And as I said, so even with the EOS R, the R5, the R6, they all have the option, which is obviously in those cameras, you have as I said, the color matrix, and that with the neutral, that obviously match that as well. So
absolutely. So that's useful for the, I guess, basic level of multi-camera work. So at the most basic, I guess that's A camera, B camera for interviews. But at a slightly more complicated level is something like this, where you're not doing anything clever with all the cameras. The cameras are just set as they are, but you're just taking a signal and mixing it together. So how do we take that to the next step?
I mean, if we're still talking about obviously that we do, as we mentioned, the different lenses as well.
Oh, cool. Yep.
I mean, as I said, if you still want to grade the footage at a later stage, obviously you still have C-Log 2, C-Log 3, depending on the camera. Even with the CRN 500 PTZ that we're using, that has log 3 as well. So even with that, you can still shoot flat if you want to, and that's going to give you flexibility in post if you want to. Another thing that I guess does make your life easier as well if you tend to swap lenses. Obviously, in this setup, the lenses on the cameras are going to be going to remain the same until the end of the stream. But there are scenarios where you might need to swap lenses, and the benefit of swapping lenses when they're actually Canon lenses is you still keeping that same look, so you wouldn't notice a difference, obviously, apart from focal length between CNE Prime and one of the Cine servos or any other Canon cinema lens that you might put on the C500, C300, or even the R5C.
Sure.
So, and again, because the lenses is giving you that warm look that everyone is familiar with, those beautiful skin tones, there is less for you to worry about in terms of, again, going back to the custom pictures and try to tweak it again. So that, again, that's going to save you time. I mean, just put a few points there in terms of benefits of the Canon cinema lenses. As I said, so they are designed to meet the demands nowadays with 4K, 8K, and HDR workflows. You do get, as I said, the warm color balance. You do get nice, beautiful details in the faces, for example. The depth of field. So for those that use standard EF lenses, so photo lenses, we do have obviously very fast lenses, but it's just the look that you get from CNE Prime, for example, 11 blade aperture, so you get that beautiful bokeh. The focus breathing is suppressed, obviously, in all of these lenses, and then you do have the option to make adjustments. So depending if you're using these lenses on non-Canon cameras, then you can adjust the flange distance, and then all of these lenses, the manual lenses, you get the unified front lens diameter as well, gear position. So when you're swapping lenses, you don't have to worry about adjusting anything else on that rig. And just to give you an idea in terms of the range that we have, obviously overall in terms of RF and EF lenses, I think a couple of months ago we've gone past 150 million lenses, which is amazing.
Sold, right?
Yeah.
not to choose between.
I don't know. We don't have 150
Although there is
million.
quite a lot to choose between, but not quite 150 million.
Yeah, sold. I mean, it would be interesting if we had 150 million lenses to choose from currently. That would
It might
be
be 150.
Altogether,
there's
you
probably
probably
quite a
there
lot,
are,
aren't
yeah.
there?
You just have to prioritize what you need the lenses for. Luckily, for the cinema lenses, we have them categorized. So the latest addition to the range are what we call the flex zoom. So they are our new cinema lenses. They are manual lenses, but they are actually designed for full frame sensors. So we have 20 to 50 and then we have the 45 to 135. So they cover the range from 20 millimeter to 135, and they are fast lenses as well. So bright lenses, 2.4 across the range, which is again great. So for bigger productions, so movie productions, for example, on high-end cameras, they'll work amazingly well. Again, they still keep up with the tradition of the look that you get or you expect from the cinema cameras. Lens data that might be needed, so like with the Kukai, and then obviously with the EF option, you do get all the information from EF body, so Canon cameras in particular. So you do have quite a lot that, as I said, these lenses can offer. Oops. And then we've got the Cine Zoom. So we have the two types of manual cinema lenses. Obviously, as I said, taking the flex zoom out of the equation. We've got like the 14.5 to 60, again 2.6, and then the 30 to 300, and then we have the compact zoom, so they're slightly smaller, the 15.5 to 47, and then the 30 to 105. Cine primes, still very, very popular. I mean, there are people even using them on stills cameras years ago. This is basically a range of lenses, of focal lengths from 14. So we have the 14, the 20 mil, 24, 35, 50, 85, and 135, with fast apertures. Again, very, as I said, popular for like interviews or even in terms of incorporating these in movie productions, for example. The smear rays are, I mean, when we introduce them, they're basically more of giving you a similar look to those familiar with the K35s. So again, they have this cinematic look about them. So the portraits or the faces, that basically it gives them like a softer, unique look. Again, great for movies. We do have the same range of focal length with the smear rays, same as the Cine primes, but you get them as PL. There is an option to, if you want to basically change the mount to EF if you need them on an EF body, and then we have the servo ones. So with the servo, we had the Cine servos. I mean, the CN20 is very popular and they've been used in bigger documentaries like even Planet Earth and Blue Planet and other documentaries. Yeah, so that's the 50 to 1000. We have the CN10 that we introduced with the C300 Mark III, and the CN7, which is still very popular.
Absolutely.
And then finally, we have the compact servo. Loads of people are very familiar with these because they're smaller and more affordable in comparison to the Cine servo. So we have the 18 to 80, and then we have the 70 to 200, where you get, depending on obviously the cameras, you get the autofocus, and then you can drive the zoom from the camera or from the servo units that you get with these lenses as well. So any of these lenses being used on Canon cameras, as I said, the look remains the same when you're swapping these lenses around, as I said. So this is another easier way to reduce your workload and having to worry about color matching later.
And there's something there for all sorts of levels of multi-camera shoot, from the simple stuff like we're doing right here today, all the way up to the big shoots, be that cinema multi-camera or you know, the Glastonbury's of the world, like I said, you know, those huge gigs using the servo zooms.
I mean, we still have obviously our extensive EF photo lenses, which are great for video as well, and then the RF now. So the RF range is expanding now, so we do have more lenses. But yeah, so you can, obviously these are the cinema lenses, but we still have great EF and RF lenses that you can use, especially on the R5C and on the C70.
Sure. So that's the cameras matching, that's the lenses matching, but obviously I mean, you guys don't do anything that does the mixing side of things, but you have got some newer tricks, which are something relatively new for Canon, really, aren't they? To actually control all of these cameras.
Yes. So last year when we introduced PTZs, obviously that was new product range for us. One great thing about it is what we call the XC protocol, which is the control that we use to control our cameras using the controller that obviously came out at the same time.
This one.
But one of the advantages of this, which we added via a firmware update at a later stage, is with the C300 Mark III, for example, C500 Mark II, even with the XF605, you can use the same controller to control these cameras. Obviously, what you can control depending on which lens you have on, like the C300, for example, and a 500. But you can still, for example, adjust the settings. You can still zoom if you have like servo lenses on the 500 and the 300, which I think it makes a massive difference. That means someone with the C500 and a 300 can easily incorporate a CRN 500 and an XF605 into the same setup.
Absolutely.
And not having to worry about how many more camera operators they need. So it's, which I think it's a bigger benefit for us, because I don't think there is another manufacturer that does a same thing. So again, I would say that's another bonus of using Canon in a multi-camera setup.
Absolutely. I mean, having central camera control in one place is hugely important for things like this, because it means that, you know, right now, so I mean, I've got this control in front of me here, which in theory we could be controlling, no, not all of our cameras, because the C70 doesn't.
There will be hopefully at some point a firmware update to add the XC protocol to the R5C, to the C70.
Cool. Very cool.
Pretty much the full video range or cinema range. So
that would be great. When that happens, you could literally use this controller to change the settings on all of them. At the moment, I haven't got that set up, so I can't actually show that. This is just set up for our PTZ moving around. But so right now, when it's not set up, so sitting in front of the multi-viewer over there, the only way that I can change anything on any of these, which you really want to do, because, you know, it's hard to tell things like, is the exposure consistent? And, you know, does you know, that white wall behind you look a similar shade as this white wall behind me? The only way that you can tell that is when you're sitting in front of both of them at the same time over in the multi-viewer. And then to change it, raise or lower the f-stop or the ISO, whatever, you've got to head back to the camera, which in some situations is really quite hard to do. And so it does make, even something as simple as that makes a huge difference, way more than I think people who are new to multi-camera would think it does. And
even, I guess, sometimes is, especially nowadays with limited budget for like smaller productions, you want to obviously reduce the number of people, camera operators sometimes, sadly, it comes down to that. So this could be sometimes a solution of having more than one camera without increasing the cost, obviously needing more camera operators to work on those different cameras.
Absolutely.
And then going back to the colors and YDR that we mentioned, even with the CRN 500, for example, you can still use YDR if you want to, or as I said earlier, you've got C-Log if you want C-Log 3 if you want to shoot flat and color grade later.
Absolutely.
So do you have, because I don't know how many people are aware or familiar with our PTZ range, so I thought I'd just give an overview of the two indoor ones. I mean, we do have 4 at the moment. 2 outdoor ones and 2 indoor ones. Obviously, the outdoor ones.
We had a question about the outdoor ones.
Okay.
Off air with Jez says, how does the PTZ cameras do when exposed to the elements? If this camera is to be used outdoors for an extended period of time, can you buy a rain cover or a case, or is the body weather sealed? And Richard has pointed out that there are outdoor versions of the PTZ cameras. Do you know if the indoor ones would hold up at all to being outside? Do you if you're going to use them outside, would you really have to use the outdoor ones?
I guess it depends on where you're going to install them, because any amount of water, I mean, they don't have the same, the indoor ones don't have any weather sealing like with the outdoor ones. If it's raining, for example, with the outdoor ones, you've got the front wiper, so it actually clears the lens. You don't have that option on the indoor ones. I mean, I've seen not Canon ones, but I've seen other manufacturers that you can kind of get a housing for them.
Yep.
I know we don't do housing for our indoor PTZ to be used outside, but maybe that's something that I guess third party can do.
Yep.
I know obviously there is a difference in the price, but yeah, as I said, it depends on the installation. I guess maybe if they're installed somewhere where there is cover, so at least it's protecting them from the rain, and you can still get the power to the camera, then yeah. But out in the open, like in stadiums and that sort of thing, no.
He specifically says outdoors for an extended period of time, so could you buy a rain cover or a case? I mean, I would always recommend going for the, if you can, go for the outdoor ones, especially for an extended period of time, even over a big fancy third-party housing, you know. Simple things like the built-in wiper is just a huge advantage. Another little question has popped up about the things. We'll go through the slides to go through the key features. But just quickly, LG YouTube is saying, is it possible to achieve a short depth of field with the N500 compared to the C70? I mean, the C70 will always have a shallower depth of field. And you can see on this shot to me, this is at f1.2. So, you know, super 35mm sensor with f1.2. The shells behind me, the monitors behind me are very much out of focus. But you can still achieve shallow depth of field. So if we cut to the PTZ, okay, let's have a little look. So if we go to maybe that, you can see as I zoom in, you know, those monitors are definitely out of focus behind me, and the camera pops. And if I zoom back and head over to Mehdia, doing this on the fly here, you can see as it focuses on her. This is the advantage of the autofocus, by the way. It is, you know, I'm just not having to worry about focus at all. It's just doing it automatically for you. That monitor, I mean, there's not much behind you there, but the bird in the picture is definitely out of focus. So, you know, you can get some, but if I'm to frame up a similar sort of medium shot, if you like, yeah, not a huge amount of depth of field. There's a couple more questions. JHB says, does the outdoor versions have ND filters?
The CRX 500 does, yes.
Okay.
It's automatic on the 300 version. So.
Okay. And ADOT says, we're keen on the N500, however the lack of 4K on SDI is an issue. Is this a hardware or software limitation? Any chances of opening that up, or is it for the next generation? It's a hardware thing,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, because it's 3G SDI, yep. So you get 4K via HDMI, but not SDI. I mean, the outdoor one, for example, with the 12G SDI, CRX 500, does have that option. But yeah, obviously the 300 and the 500, well, 500 in particular, because that's the most popular one for the indoor ones. They are our first PTZ cameras, and we are listening to feedback, and hopefully the next one will have the 12G SDI and will allow to basically allow you to record 4K externally.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
By SDI, so yeah.
Okay, cool. A couple of other super quick little questions, just for me from the thing off air. Which says he's coming to the UK from Australia in July. Is there anything cool, cheapish, handy gadgets or accessories that he could pick up in the showroom to remember his visit by? It's a strange souvenir to take back from a holiday, but yeah, of course we sell all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of little handy gadgets or accessories, as you put it, in the showroom to pick up lots of articulating arms, little monitors, that kind of stuff, little lights, loads of stuff. And Renex Media says, how can I buy Canon cameras and lenses? He's in Africa, in Uganda. Obviously, there'll be local dealers of some description, no matter what country you are in the world. So if you can buy it locally, that's an option. But international companies like us, we ship worldwide as well. So there's options there as well. Okay, cool. Should we run through the two main
indoor ones, yeah,
indoor PTZs, and just go through the main? Because I think for multi-camera work, especially in a post-COVID world, you know, remote cameras and PTZs have just spiked massively in popularity, and for very good reason. They are, I think, rewind like maybe not as long as 10, but 5 to 7 years. I think people did look down on cameras like this quite a lot, sort of thinking, oh, the image quality is just
that's the thing, because
not even worth going near.
I think because people, when they look at PTZ, they see security cameras.
Exactly.
And in their mind, yeah, security cameras, quality is not great. It's not something that I'll use.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at the range, I mean, it's not just Canon, even other manufacturers, you look at the spec
Yep.
of the PTZs and what they're capable of doing, they are pretty much, at least for us talking about Canon PTZs, the way these cameras came about is actually combining the technology from security cameras or network cameras
Yep.
and our camcorders. So for
Absolutely.
those that use Canon camcorders, be it the XA range or the XF range, they're familiar with the look, they're familiar with the colors and the quality, and they can see that in the PTZ cameras.
Shall we hop out of the PowerPoint presentation and into the browser actually for the PTZ, and then we can literally show that to people. Yeah, just drag it onto that monitor and it should show on stream.
Yeah, so
Bing. There we go. So if you've got to the laptop, so okay. So this is when you connect to the IP address of the camera.
so this is controlling the camera via browser.
Absolutely.
There is a software application which is free to download, but it's only on Windows. Whereas for this, I've got obviously a Mac here.
Yep.
So the one way around it for those that don't have Windows computer is to use the browser remote, and you do have the control in terms of zoom, pan, and tilt.
I guess the main difference here is that this is for a single camera, whereas the actual software or this controller, you can control multiple cameras at once.
Yeah, so so with one camera, you can obviously easily just use this.
Yep.
If you have two or more, that's where the software application come in. Or if you have more than 20, then the hardware the hardware controller can actually control up to 100 PTZ cameras.
Yep.
Well, as the software is up to 20. With the software, you can basically have shortcuts or use USB game controllers.
Yep.
To control it, because that means the panning and the tilting will be a lot smoother than trying with the push of a button.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or like in here, me trying to basically just
Yeah.
do that. So it's a lot smoother with a form of controller.
But what I love about this is somebody who has no background in PTZs or networking or any of that stuff at all. This all looks so familiar to me. You know, this is the same sort of menu structure.
Yeah.
And terminology is the most important bit. The terminology is the same as it is on camcorders and even mirrorless cameras, really.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, most of the options in there are the options that you would have seen in camcorders in particular, but even some of the cinema cameras. So in here, where you've got the NDs, for example, that you can apply the built-in NDs, the modes as well. I mean, most people would have it in manual, but you still have the option to have it on fully automatic, so the camera will adjust the settings for you. Obviously, it depends on the lighting and the setup.
Sure.
And then you have all the options. So if you're in manual, then you can obviously change your iris, your shutter speed or shutter mode, gain. So everything can be either set to fully automatic or fully manual. You have extensive color changes. So when we mentioned earlier about the color matrix, you can get into like deep.
This is the sort of stuff that you normally see on PTZs, which
it can be very confusing. And
I normally don't go near.
You can always, I guess, one way is resetting it. White balance. You can obviously key in the Kelvin if you want to. So as I said, you do have full control in terms of what you can change on the camera. Custom profile, or as we mentioned.
Actually, we're in back 7. That should be in YDR, shouldn't it?
Yeah, there we go.
Let's change it. There we go. Done. Now the PTZ will be looking slightly better.
So you've got YDR, and even within that, you can go into as I said, the color matrix and change it, for example, from video into neutral. So as I said, and then adjusting sharpness, for example, focus. So again, those familiar with the focus options on the, you see the box on
Yep,
my
absolutely.
face, familiar with the Canon focus options, where you have face priority, face only. The CRN 500, which is the camera we're using, does actually use dual pixel CMOS IF. So the same autofocus that we have in our camcorders and cinema cameras.
So if I move that completely away from you to something else, and you can click on the screen,
Yeah,
I
so you
believe,
can
to
basically
focus.
tap on the screen, tell it where you want it to focus, and then it
There we
can
go.
basically track it if you want to.
Yeah, so that box is staying with that camera. Yeah, it's not quite the full suite of autofocus controls that you get in a camera, but it's not too far off, really. It's pretty good.
And then in terms of the PTZ options, then you can adjust the speed. So when you're panning, tilting, how fast you want the acceleration to be. The cameras do have an image stabilizer as well. So if they use on a tripod, for example, or on the ceiling, that actually helps. So it reduces the movement, even digital zoom. The CRN 500 has a 15 times zoom. So again, the same range of zoom as the XF605. So you're looking at just over 25 mil to about 380, which is a great range.
And the image stabilizer works really well, actually. In fact, we might be able to demo that live because we're on a fairly long thing. This is where it's all going to start to go wrong. So yeah, if you cut to the PTZ camera, we leave it on Mehdia there, and now literally you tap on the tripod, you can see a slight shake, but nothing too much. And if we turn the image stabilizer off in the software, yeah, it's that one in the middle. There we go. Yeah, click on that one. And here, yep. Okay, powered ice is probably actually better for this situation. So tap again, Sergey. So you're getting even less shake there with powered IS. And now you turn it off and you see the difference that it's making. And now tap. Interestingly, it's not actually making that. It's not actually. Are you tapping gentler? What's going on there?
It's a good tripod.
Yeah, maybe.
But
I've done a few tests on that where it's been really quite noticeable, the difference that.
Yeah, I mean, because the setup where we have the tripod is slightly, I mean, the camera is slightly lower. And then, as I said, you are using a decent tripod. Yeah. So that helps. But if obviously, depending on where the camera, as I said, is set up, image stabilizer can make a massive difference.
My next Mehdia is saying, what is the name of the software you're using or showing in that live stream? That is the browser. So it's not software. It's inside any web browser. You open it up, type in the IP address of that camera, and this pops right up if they're on the same network.
Yeah. And then you have the presets. Again, up to 100 presets per camera. You can rename them, it will be easier on the setup. So like white shots, and depending if it's pointing at different cameras, like what Carl did with the PTZ earlier, different cameras, so you can name it.
So I could call this one Sergey. There we go.
So you know when you press it where it's gonna go. That transition from one preset to another. Again, you can smooth it, so you can slow the speed of the panning and the tilting while it's actually moving from one preset to another.
I can do. There we go. So now it's going to. Oh, maybe not. PT speed. That's just manually. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Sorry, I was controlling the manual.
The speed that you have, that's the one that will be saved when you save in the presets. So if it was that slow, then it will use it, or you can apply it when you're actually saving the presets as well.
Okay.
So again, that can be, and then you have the systems option. This is where you go to choose basically if you want to record, for example, full HD. Or 4K out of the HDMI, because obviously that will affect what's coming out of the SDI.
Yep.
If you want to record this full HD from SDI, then the HDMI needs to be on full HD as well, not 4K. System frequency, again, it's all in here. Enabling NDI. Most of the networking settings is actually in the system here, so you don't need to go anywhere else. So everything in terms of the image setting as well as the camera setting, as I said, IP, etc., can be set from the browser.
Absolutely.
Firmware update, you can reset the cameras, all done through here.
So really, for people who aren't used to the world of PTZs, the journey with these cameras, I guess, is learning that little bit of IP to get started. Things about IP addresses. Is it a dynamic IP? Is it a static IP? And how do you access that and remember that?
Yes, that's true.
Didn't happen to us just before the stream. Definitely not.
Basically, the cameras will give you the option to, on the top of setting, I mean, I prefer manual or static IP addresses because at least there are certain environments where automatic could work. But on the top of that, you can set up basically login details to different users and restrict what they can and can't do once they gain basically access. You need to remember that username and password because there is no way around it, which is why we had to reset the camera earlier.
Yeah, it's a bit different when these cameras are used by multiple people all around the business and customer demos and all the rest of it. When it's you and your kit and your setup, it tends to be much easier to work with static IPs that you set to be what you want to be. But yeah, that once you've got your head around that sort of basic IP sort of networking knowledge, you really don't have to delve that much further into anything that's outside of the ordinary for anyone that's involved with cameras. All of this stuff is very, very straightforward in terms of actually using the cameras, getting them to match, all the rest of it. It is just that initial networking speed bump to get over, which hopefully for most people should be fairly straightforward. So should we go through the key features and the differences between the two models then?
Okay, so this is the CRN 300. So this is the smaller entry-level one. So it does have a slightly smaller sensor. So it's 1/2.3 inch sensor. It still delivers that 4K quality up to 30. You do get 20 times optical zoom on this. Hybrid autofocus. So it has, the way the hybrid autofocus works is there is, you have an external sensor that does the phase difference autofocus, and then there is an internal one by the sensor that actually does contrast autofocus, and then it combines the two to give you fast autofocus, which is still faster than most of the PTZ cameras out there that just rely on contrast. And from the test that we've done, even with this one, as I said, that has a smaller sensor and not dual pixel CMOS AF, the autofocus was still very fast, even compared to the XA5055 or XF405 for that.
Well, pretty much
which
every
have
other
bigger sensors. So
pan tilt camera has contrast-based autofocus, so even it doesn't have to go the full hog to be better than most of those.
Built-in NDs as well, and then as I said, you can customize it so you get that smooth and precise pan and tilt. In terms of connectivity, so you have 3G SDI, HDMI, IP obviously, and USB. The USB on this particular camera can allow you to use it as a webcam. There is a firmware update that we announced April. It was a long time ago. That did or does allow now pretty much all the PTZs, with the exception of the CRX 500, to be used as webcams as an option. Obviously, you're not going to buy these cameras especially to be used as webcams, but you do have the option.
Yep. That's about flexibility.
Yeah.
It's about having a kit which, no matter what your clients chuck at you, you can, and you don't have to rely on other kit if all they want is a simple.
And once you install that firmware update, and you have the cameras connected in the network, you don't need to do anything else. They can automatically get recognized.
Yep.
And you can use up to 5 of them in one setup. H.265 support, and then, as I said, this is what I mentioned about the Canon protocol. You've got RTP and RTSP, and the IHX, RTMP, Visca, and Visca over IP as well, so it can be integrated into your Sony setup, or even in terms of any camera using NDR protocol as well, easily integrated. Literally, the minute the camera is connected to the network, it can easily be set up. So this is the little one, or the baby one as they call it.
Because it really is quite small, actually.
But when we put it next to the CRN 500, I mean, there is difference. This weighs around 2 kilograms. Not great in pounds, because working that one out. And the 500, which is the one we're using here, is about 4 kilograms. So it's twice the weight, and it's almost twice the size. So the CRN 500, so this is the one with the 1-inch sensor. Said again, you do have 4K option up to 30, 15 times zoom, as I said. So you're looking at 25mm to about 380 dual pixel CMOS AF, so you do benefit with this camera from that fast, precise and accurate autofocus. Very customizable, as you saw with the browser, so you can control set it up for face priority, face only, built-in NDs, again 3G SDI, HDMI. This has 2 XLRs as well for audio. Again, it does support H.265. You have wide DR on this and C-Log 3. And then same as what we said about the 300 in terms of the control protocols and streaming protocols. Then you've got XC protocol, and then all of the other ones, as I said, the NDRHX, VSCO over IP. And then again, you do get that smooth and precise control over the pan and tilt. So these are basically the 2 cameras in a nutshell. As I said, there is a lot more. Both of them do have the image stabilizer, as I mentioned. The full HD is oversampled from 4K because both cameras do have 4K sensors. As I said, for HDMI, you're looking at maximum resolution of 4K up to 30, and SDI is full HD up to 50 or 60, depending on your setup. They can be set up on ceiling. You can get wall mount for them, or you can use them on tripod, like what we have the one here. Trying to think what else. And as I said, in terms of controllers, you do have the RCI P100, which is the Canon controller that you can get to control these PTZ cameras. As I said, the controller can control up to 100. For easy management of cameras, if you have loads of them, it does group them, so you end up with 10 cameras per group. So it's easier to manage 10 groups, 10 camera per group. That's your 100 cameras. And the same for the presets, because you can save up to 100 presets per camera, which is quite a lot.
Crazy.
Again, you do have the 10 groups. So you can basically have 10 presets per group.
I suppose with a
groups.
big multi-camera shoot, I suppose they do add up. I mean, I've used 9 for this. And so, I suppose I could see how they do add up very quickly.
There are other, obviously, as I said, this is with the controllers. We do have the Windows controller that I mentioned. And there are other third-party controllers as well. I mean, the one we've tested is the Scarhoy ones as well. So again, they can be used with the Canon XC protocol and in a Canon setup as well.
Very nice. Very nice. I mean, that's the PTZ lineup. There's also a couple of outdoor ones, aren't there?
Yeah, so we have the CRX 300, which is, again, I mean, the easier way to compare them is the CRN 300. There is the outdoor version of it is the CRX 300 with 6G SDI rather than 3G SDI. And then the CRX 500, that takes it to another level, because I said that has 12G SDI. So you can do 4K externally. And you do have dual pixel CMOS AF. You do have just lost my train of thought on that. And you have YDR, C-Log 3.
All the other.
And it is bigger, and obviously that is our most expensive one.
Yes.
When you're looking about the 20 grand plus.
Yes, by quite some margin. It's definitely.
Yes.
I mean, you're paying for the outdoor.
Yeah, as I said, the weather sealing, the wipers and everything.
Incredibly robust outdoor camera platform. So that's a full range of PTZ cameras, alongside a full range of cinema cameras, alongside a full range of mirrorless cameras, alongside a full range of camcorders, all of which play very friendly together. I mean, how often do you see people crossing the lines between those and using all sorts of different things together? Or do you find people tend to stick to one of those groups and try and use the cameras together?
I mean, there are loads of people that, as you said, stick to, if they're using cinema cameras, they just stick with the cinema cameras. more recently, I think more people have started to use camcorders in the same mix. I think PTZ, it took people a little bit longer to probably trust it because, again, they were not sure about the quality. But I think from the test that people have done, I think that obviously there is more trust now in PTZ. So hopefully we'll see more setups where you can start with a PTZ, and you can still be using a C500 and a C300 in the same kind of multi-camera setup. So,
do you think there is ever a future where we move towards an even higher level of quality on PTZs? You know, the Super 35 sensors or in full frame sensors. I mean, that would be a whole nother level of image quality on a PTZ.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just thinking about the size of the camera when the sensor gets bigger. But I mean, as I said, for us, this was just the start. And as I said, there will be more cameras in the future, and then more powerful cameras in terms of, like, as I said, what the question that we had earlier about being able to record 4K externally, for example. So there will be more cameras in the future where you get 12G SDI, probably in terms of the resolution as well. At the moment, you're looking at 4K. In the future, we'll probably even see, 6K, 8K. So yeah.
No, we'll
for the bigger productions, I think, for bigger productions or larger productions where the camera is going to be set up either on a wall or in the ceiling, the size and the weight of the camera is not going to be a massive difference. So I guess there is an opportunity for larger sensors. Full frame probably is overkill.
That might be a bit overkill. You'd sacrifice massively the zoom range and all the rest of it you can get.
But Super 35, who knows?
Cool. Let's wrap up a little bit then. But I've got a lovely question here for you to finish on from Loom TV. He says, where do I get these Canon Cinema EOS polo shirts? And don't tell me it's just for employees. I need this.
I guess depends where you're based. I mean, we can send
Mehdia will sell you one out the back of her car.
We can send a few to Pro AV, and then you can collect it from Pro AV.
There we go. Free shirts. You heard it here. Right, I think that is fantastic. If anyone has any more questions, of course, on multi-camera, you can get in touch with our sales team. You can send a message to our technical support. You can leave a comment on these videos. You can ask Canon directly. There's so many different ways. If you're sitting there struggling with I mean, things get infinitely more complicated when you start multiplying the amounts of cameras that you've got involved. So if you're sitting there wanting any more advice on any of this stuff, please do get in touch. In fact, and the one's just coming from Stuart saying, can you recommend a switcher to work with the M500 and the controller you're using? You can use so many different things, so many different things. I do quite like TriCasters with the Canon simply because they have NDI built into them, and so you can have one network for your control, your picture and everything being controlled by a TriCaster. So a TriCaster Mini 4K, for example, nice simple small one, or bigger if you need more cameras. But you can do as simple as we're using here. You know, we're going straight into a little A10 Mini. If I go back to our shot of Sergey, if you cut to the PTZ, you can see we're just taking all of this into the A10 Mini Pro, which I believe is that. Nope, that's the multi-camera, but you can see there. I think that one is the A10 Mini Pro, you know, or any of the other Blackmagics will work perfectly fine there. So there are so many different switches. There's also a lot more little portable ones. We're seeing some really good things by all sorts of different manufacturers. There's LiveView, there's YOLO Box, there's all sorts of different ones. Oh, he has a TriCaster. Okay, so yeah, TriCaster works flawlessly with these because these have NDI HX built into them, which of course the TriCaster runs off. But yeah, if you want any more detailed advice, please do get in touch. We can help you out. But for now, thank you so much for joining me, Mehdia.
Thank you for having me, and I hope the content of this live stream has been useful to everyone watching. Until the next one.
Absolutely. Right, take care, everyone. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Action. Good. I need more passion. Camera up.
Turn up the heat and make those embers glow.
Beautiful.